Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. I know we're going to probably have people trickle in over the next couple of minutes, so I am going to just walk through a couple of things because I love a workshop. I love especially ones that do with strategy and reviews. And I know that you guys are going to take away quite a few things from today. It's going to go incredibly quickly. Um, and we're going to get into things as soon as we possibly can. Like I said, we're just going to give it a few minutes to make sure that people that want to filter in do. And I'm just going to go through a couple of things first. So, whether we are talking business and you're showing up with your business head today, whether it is about personal performance, things around this topic can get quite sensitive. It is the nature of coaching, even more so when we are dealing with mindset shifts. And, you might want to ask me questions and wish that you could give a load of context, which is difficult in this kind of webinar scenario. If you feel comfortable as we're going along each section, drop your questions in either the chat if you are happy to give away your anonymity or in the Q&A, and I will make sure that anybody that comes in through the Q&A, I do not say their name. So if you have a question that requires more context and you want to add that to it, but you don't want anybody else to know, that's absolutely fine. Just drop it into the Q&A section and I'll make sure that that's covered. Of course, you can always message me after this session as well. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can, my details will be given as well after this recording is sent around and everything. So you can always email me as well. But I want to make sure that everybody who goes through this session today or is watching the recording afterwards gets a level of support that they want and that they need. There should be plenty of time as we go through this to get through those questions. But like I said, just in case there isn't, we've got that covered afterwards. And please feel free to DM me. Um, I'm just going to double check. Yeah, okay, perfect. People are floating in. All right, let's just get straight into it. So I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And let's get into it. Okay. So, for anybody that has not seen me before, hello, my name is Caroline. I am the founder of Craft Coaching, and essentially, I work to rewire the mindset, the strategy, the behavior of digital businesses. Um, and a line that I use a lot is that so that people stop chasing outcomes and start engineering them. And the word outcome is going to be incredibly important to the rest of this session, and we're gonna get into why exactly later on. But for a lot of businesses that come towards me, the thing that they want is growth. Usually that means scaling. And how do you do that in a way that is intentional, but without burning out or stressing the team or overloading the team and all of these things? I have well over a decade now. I always put like 10 plus years, but it's way over that now. I need to revisit that in B2B sales and marketing. And I have lost count of the number of strategy workshops that I have run, and the number of reviews and review sessions that I've run. And I used to think when I first started that it was all about numbers. It was all about the tactics. It was all about the commercials. Um, but look, while all of those are very important, they don't mean anything without one incredibly important element, and we're going to cover that today. And when I was putting together this half year review piece, the main thing that I had in mind was all the people that do focus on chasing the numbers all the time, but then you get to, June, July, and you're like, oh my God, it's summer, and what happened? Why are things not happening in the way that I thought they would? Or why did this happen? Why did that happen? But the problem is you're so caught up in the day to day that we rarely take time to take a step back and to think at that high level and to process it. And as a high performance specialist too, and growing up in the agency landscape professionally, which can be fast paced, it can be brutal. I have seen too many people break down from burnout, and I refuse to let that carry on my watch, because another thing that happens when we get to that half year point, a lot of people go on holiday and they get ill, especially business owners, especially senior leaders and directors, because we just keep going. And what I want this session to be for you is the chance to take a step back and the chance to get back control over what is happening either in your business, in your department, in your life, if you're looking at this from a personal performance perspective. Reviews and carving out time to do them are incredibly important because it gives you that perspective that we so often neglect. So I want this to kind of be that chance for you to do this. And hopefully, I'm going to give you um, not only something that is a repeatable framework that you can walk away with today, but also something that you could, potentially run within your teams. It can be something that if you're showing up today wanting a half year review for yourself, you can quite literally follow this along. Um, but if you are showing up here wanting to take that time to think about the business and get yourself into that headspace, you can always take this and run it internally. So you could make notes from that perspective, and for now, just let it wash over you. Side note, if you are somebody that is routinely distracted from notifications, now is the time to put it on silent just for this next hour and give yourself the best chance of thinking clearly. What you can expect from today. This time is going to disappear, like I said, but by the end of it, you'll have that clear understanding of what has happened so far. You'll get a handle on the good, the bad, the ugly, and a clear set of adjusted goals, because this is another thing about half year reviews. This is your time to pivot. You don't pivot on a monthly basis. You do not have the data to back it up. But once a quarter or once a half a year is where you really want to adjust them. You'll then get more control over what's to come for this next period. You'll go into the summer or be able to go away on holiday with an element of relaxation there because you know that you've worked it all out and you've got it covered. And understanding what the next steps are to ensure that all those things happen. And we're going to tackle some of the difficult stuff and some of the main blockers that get in the way of businesses succeeding. How this is going to work is we're going to have a retro, always start with a retro, then the dream, then what are the blockers, and then I'll give you a freebie to help you as well. Um, Now obviously I put scale because most of the businesses that I work with, when they want to take this stuff away, it's because they have growth goals in mind, revenue targets, that kind of thing. But if it's for yourself and it's a personal thing, then you can also use that free session to make sure that you are personally on track. So before we get into this, I want you to think about one question. And I want you to really, really think about it. And I'm even going to pause and give you a session to do it. Have you been honestly obsessing over outcomes or outputs? Because before we jump into the good stuff, I cannot stress the importance of this question enough. This is going to frame the entire next 50 minutes because so many businesses approach reviews, especially half year ones, where potentially hundreds of thousands in revenue are on the line, especially when there is a gap to close. If you're sat there watching this thinking, we've got 100K to close and we've not missed it, or maybe it's 360K. I've had that from clients as well. Maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe you haven't quite hit your targets this year and you're expecting that summer dip in leads as well. And then you're shortening even more to the last 4 months of the year and it feels really overwhelming. Answer this question honestly. When you think about the day-to-day decisions you make, which of these two are you always thinking about? Are you thinking about the big, shiny goal, the outcome? Or are you thinking about the day-to-day outputs? Just think about that for 1 second while I let my cat out of the room, because if it's not pets, it's kids. Okay, did you write something down? I want to know, did you write something down? Drop it in the chat if you did. I'm going to come off slides actually just to really talk about this point in a bit more detail because it is so important. Um, a huge amount of my time focuses on getting outcomes for businesses. We all do, especially if we work in B2B, whether it's a scaling target, whether it's change adoption, leadership impact, greater commercial confidence, all of these things are these big shiny goals that we want. And I'm sure that you have your own version within the businesses that you work in. And here's the problem that I see crop up the most. There is a time for outcomes and there is a time for outputs, but almost every business confuses when to focus on which. And here's how. We all know that when we speak to customers, the rhetoric that we use for like great sales and marketing and all that kind of stuff, whether you do it or not, is to focus on the value, right? We want to focus on showcasing like why they should care, what the value is to customers and clients if we want them to sign on the dotted line. But almost every business defaults to thinking about features, thinking about like if you're a tech provider, for example, then you'll write down this huge list of features that they get from working with you, like UX design and QA testing or whatever it happens to be. But customers expect those things. They're not the value, they're just the feature. And a lot of the time when I do strategy and messaging and all this sort of stuff, this is a big thing that I see. So most businesses, when they should be focusing on the outcome and the value, focus on the output, which is the feature. Now, on the flip side, this is a half year review, right? We're going internal. So let's go internal for a second. Let's think about when we conduct half year reviews or monthly meetings or whatever. No matter how big your business is, whether this is a monthly meeting that you conduct that's just yourself or for you and one other person, or whether it's you and 10 heads of department, irrelevant. Ask yourself again, do you focus on outcomes in those meetings or on outputs? Because more often than not, companies create a yearly strategy. They'll do their kind of annual review and all that kind of thing. And they will show up then to those monthly meetings and they will collectively measure how far away they are from that outcome, that big shiny milestone that they've got. And I'm here to tell you that that is the wrong way around. Because with your team, it's the outputs that we want to focus on. Or with yourself, it's the outputs that we want to focus on. It's the action. Why? Well, because whether it is personal performance and you showed up here today for business growth, or maybe just because you want to be healthier and that's your big goal, did you set out the strategy to achieve it, the goals, the KPIs, and then did you back engineer it into individual daily, weekly, monthly actions and outputs? Because so many people obsess that everybody is showing up and how far away are we from closing the gap or how far away are we from this big target, and that's what they obsess over. But I'm here to tell you that the better way of approaching this, and I say better because it will give you your sanity back, is that if you focus and obsess about the actions being taken, the result takes care of itself. You work out what outcome you want, you back engineer it all the way back to the individual action, and then you show up and take the action, the result takes care of itself. So if you answered that question as being, no, we're focusing on outputs every day, we're focusing on showing up and taking the action, amazing. But if you weren't, this is a really, really good time to just switch, play around with this idea as we get into the rest of this session. So I'm going to go back and I'm going, oh, we've got something in the Q&A. Oh, can you give examples of outcomes and outputs so we understand the difference? 100%. I'll give you a really, really simple one. Um, it's actually probably the most prevalent to a lot of people, especially when they first start out the year. Um, a lot of people will want to lose weight. And the outcome that they have in their head is, I want that dream body. I can see it now. I can feel it. I know exactly how I'm going to look. I'm going to feel amazing. And my clothes are going to fit. I'm going to be strong at all this sort of stuff. But you don't go and stand in the gym and then just visualize that outcome. That alone will not get you there. You can absolutely achieve it. But how do you do it? By showing up and taking the action. By showing up and making sure that your output on a daily basis is going to produce that outcome. Put this in a business context. So many businesses I work with will create scaling goals because a lot of businesses I work with are scaling, like they want to grow, right? So they'll set a revenue target. I don't know, maybe they want to earn an extra 5 million next year, something like that. In order to achieve that, you have got to therefore take different actions, because if you were just going to have to take the same action, the same outputs every single day, then you'd already have achieved it. So something needs to change. But I work with a lot of businesses where they'll start with their annual strategy and they'll start with, right, we want to earn that extra 5 million, but then they won't back engineer it. They might break it up into smaller pieces. So they're saying, right, of that 5 million, well, that's spread out over each quarter is this, and that's spread out over monthly targets is this. So this is what we can expect. But then more often than not, they won't challenge their existing output. They won't challenge the actions that are currently being executed by the team in order to get there. So when we talk about the difference between outcomes and outputs in this context, the outcome is your big, shiny goal. It's the thing that you really want to achieve. Could be a revenue target, could be something else, like a weight loss goal. The output is then the action that you show up and take every single day. It is that thing every single day where no matter what happens, you show up, you take the action, the result takes care of itself. You don't need to worry and obsess about the outcome. You do that once or twice a year, like we are right now. We're readjusting it, right? But you don't need to worry about it if you're showing up and taking the action. And that's where it takes real strength and real courage to be able to show up and say, I know what I should be doing, but I'm not doing it. And that's where somebody like myself will say, that's okay. Why aren't you doing it? Let's explore that. And usually it's fear, it's blockers, it's things like that. The reason why I'm laying this out now is because the rest of this session is going to unpick this and going to help you to challenge yourself and your team in this way, but in a way that's constructive and actually going to get you that outcome at the end of it by showing up and making sure that the output is right. I hope that that helps for that person, but thank you for asking. Okay. Um, let's go back into slides. There we go. Fabulous. All right. So, big key question. Now let's dive in. It is time for the retro. So, however you want to do this, you might have a remarkable, you might sketch things out on paper, whatever you want to do, that's absolutely fine. But if you have targets for this year, this is where you want to pull them up. If you have put together a few thoughts in prep for this of what's happened and what's not happened over the course of the last 6 months, now is the time to pull them up. If you have feedback from people, anything like that, now is the time to pull it up. And don't forget, like I said, if you're attending this webinar because you're doing this for yourself and you want to use this time as we go along, go for it. But equally, if you just want to kind of take notes, get into that headspace, and then lift this as a process and run it within your internal teams, totally cool. You can absolutely do that. And for anybody that does want to do that, please do drop me a note on LinkedIn, ask for any advice or anything like that. I'm more than happy to help you. Okay, so when we run a retro, 4 key things that we need. And this is every retro the world over. Okay. What went well? What didn't go so well? What do we need to do more of? And what did we learn? In its most basic format, every retro is the same. What went well always comes first. Why? Because it primes your brain for problem solving rather than letting it get trapped in a stress response. Our way of thinking as human beings is to always focus on the threats, to always focus on the negative stuff. And we get lured into this trap of always thinking about what we could improve. But the problem is it sets us up for a fail if we're running this as a full review, because we're now instantly in threat mode and it's very difficult to get out of. The best way to always start a retro, whether you for yourself or within your teams, and to question and to challenge what's happened, is to start with what went well. It puts you in the perfect frame of mind to do problem solving rather than just defaulting to what went wrong. So when you run internal meetings, start with this, especially if it's been a bad year, because believe me, in order to move past it, in order to move past whatever's happened to your team, they will not be able to let go of it unless you confront it with them. They cannot move past it unless you acknowledge it. It's just something that I always give to MDs and department heads whenever they want to kind of G people up at the start of a year and get all that energy. You must acknowledge what's happened, but then don't just breeze over it and be like, right, well, let's focus on the future. You must always consider, what did we learn from it? Why was this a big opportunity? We'll get to that next. But we want to start with what went well. Then you go to, okay, what didn't go so well? Because your brain is now in a place where it can think logically. It's less likely to dwell on those things. And instead, it's primed to look for solutions. So we go from what went well, and you bring it into that opportunistic state. And then you consider what didn't go well. But you must, please, if you are running this with teams, when you highlight what didn't go so well, ask them directly or ask yourself if you're doing this on your own. Why was that thing a big opportunity? Your teams cannot move past it unless they understand that. You must create a bridge between now and where you want to be psychologically for them to be able to deal with it. So in terms of the structure, that's why go with what went well first, then you move on to what didn't go so well, and it allows your brain to consider it from a better perspective. We just can't always do that for ourselves. So this is where I would question yourself. Were you focused in terms of monthly tracking on that big goal or the individual action? A lot of leaders, like I said, I work with will break down, scorecards for their team if it's personal development or goals for their team. And honestly, the number of leaders I've worked with where we've looked at their scorecards together collectively and a team member will have written a goal and then there'll be a section for actions. And under actions is basically that goal, but split into lots of mini goals. They're not actual actions. Most people don't even understand what an action is compared to a goal. It's all kind of muddled together. So I would, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh, I wonder if my team really gets that, just question that the next time you look at your monthly tracker or your scorecard or whatever it happens to be. Are those actions really as tangible and actionable as they could be, or are they kind of like mini goals? The problem with that is that goals are vague. Goals are really grander ideas. They're not actionable. They need breaking down into individual actions. And this is where I see so many team members hiding and shirking accountability. And therefore the goal never happens. And they kind of hide behind these vague metrics. And it's just because they were never really narrowed down enough into detail. So super important that you challenge that at that stage. Then, okay, what do we need to do more of? That is obviously what went well. We want to double down on it, especially when we've only got half the year left. So what should we double down on for the rest of 2025? How could we make it even better? This is the time when you want to pivot, when you want to adjust those goals for the end of the year, now that you've had the chance to experiment with different things. This is especially important if you have a revenue gap, because this is our chance to pivot from that original strategy if the facts indicate that a different method might be stronger, or ditch it entirely if it's not working. But we'll get onto that. And then finally, what did we learn? Like I said, we need that bridge between where we've been and where we want to be for the team. They can't make that psychological leap on their own. So we need to always say, why was it a great opportunity? And the story that I share a lot is a colleague of mine during the banking crisis was working with the CEO. I cannot name the bank, unfortunately, but you can imagine a major bank. Things had changed within 48 hours drastically, and it could not really look any worse. And the energy in the room, the CEO had to walk into the room of directors and all the senior members of staff, and basically, it was the energy in the room could not be any lower. And the first words out of her mouth, didn't say anything else, was just, I want everybody to tell me why the last 48 hours was the best thing that ever happened to us. And the energy in the room shifted massively. Now, that took strength to be able to do that. But it meant, in the same way that we're doing here with your teams, that they were able to put what had happened into perspective, to think about it in a different way, to reframe it. And the more that you do this for yourself and for your team, the easier it will get. So we always have to look at what did we learn? Challenge it. Why didn't it go so well? It's okay that it did. You know, shit does happen. And it's important that we don't shy away from it. We actually lean into it. It's so important that if you want to motivate the team, um, that those experiences are explored. They're not just swept under the carpet. Let's forget about it. Let's pretend it didn't happen. There's always an opportunity there. It just is sometimes a bit harder to find. And just as a guide as well for anybody that's wanting to do this within their teams, there are often three key areas that you'll want to do this over. There's the commercials, there's process, and there's people. Commercials, obviously, everything around tactics, numbers, etc. Process, the structures in place, the habits, that patterns of behavior, and then people. That includes yourself if you're a solopreneur, or you're a solo manager, by the way, as well. And I've just ironed out a couple of examples that I'll share with you now, just to show the different ways that you could do this. But I'll just double check. Nothing in the chat, I don't think. No, we're good. Um, so, for example, if you are a founder, commercials wise, the good stuff, the things that went well, it might be revenue growth, it might be new logos you brought on board, how many new clients, what account growth, conversion rate improvements, all of these things. Whereas processes would be more like, well, which products sold best, which systems worked, which messages landed. Whereas for people, you might take a view on, well, over the last 6 months, which contractors, suppliers have stood us in good stead, and what about your own personal performance? What went well? What could you take forward? What would you do more of? All those sorts of things. Whereas on the more negative side, although I hate to use that word because I always think that what hasn't gone well teaches you just as much as the good stuff. But the commercials might be things like, well, lost clients, deals that you didn't win, difficult quarters or months over the last 6 months. Processes, well, what products obviously didn't sell? Which systems fell apart that you didn't think would? You thought you had it nailed, but somewhere there was a bottleneck or there was an issue. Tactics that didn't work, partnerships that fell through. This is the time to question it. And people, often your own mindset challenges. Maybe it's mental resilience. Did anybody burn out? Your capacity and performance and that of your team as well. And now, speaking of which, let's get more into a team lead frame of mind. Well, for you, the commercials might be business outcomes, targets, campaigns and campaign success, the projects that you ran, the wider business reputation, if that's something that you contribute to as a department lead. Whereas the processes you might look at were, well, your best deals, if it's something to do with sales. It might be the best work that you delivered as a team. It might be the best collaborations that you had if you were in memberships or partnerships, and just quite simply the best systems that you have in place. What worked really well. And then with people, might be talent acquisition. You might have brought on a new hire that was just bang on. Why? What was it about it that made it work so well? The high performers, I should say, in the team, and the values that were instilled. Maybe those are things that you want to look at. Whereas on the flip side, things that might need improvement or might hold other opportunities are things like targets that you missed, revenue gaps that have evolved, efficiency or profitability dips. Processes, it might be issues with project management or bids, might be issues with delivery systems, might be issues with tactics, testing, experimentation that just didn't work out. But for people, it might be performance issues in the team. Were there any difficult conversations that you should have had, but you didn't? And if you'd only had it sooner, things would have changed, things would have worked out. Conflicts in the team, leadership challenges, managing up is a massive one. Resistance to change, lack of accountability, like we talked about. Are you showing up and taking the action? Are you focusing on outputs every day and it being the right output? Or are you just obsessing about that big goal that is vague and that just takes every waking hour? Now is the time to question it. Now, whatever the answer to all of those things, there's always got to be these off the back of them. So, whatever your answers were to what happened, why? Always. Why did the good stuff work? Why did the bad stuff reach that point? Why did the team struggle? And why did you burn out? And this is something that, aside from that earlier note on outputs and outcomes that I will share, this is probably the second that I will say that is super important. Assume nothing. As leaders, we assume far too much. We assume that the reason those people don't get on is because of X, Y, Z. We assume that this didn't work out because of that. We assume all these things. Why? Because our brain is typically so overwhelmed that it really doesn't like to add any more decisions to the mix than it has to. It absolutely has to. So things that are day to day and that are, maybe team conflicts is a good example. If you've got people coming towards you saying that this disagreement's happened, this conflict's happened, whatever, we will often, using all the context, jump to what we think the solution is or assume that we have all the pieces of information to be able to make that call, and often we don't. Especially when we look at half year reviews, this becomes even more important. Don't just think, oh, well, we lost that pitch because of that and let's move on from it. Your brain wants to lean away from pain. It wants to run away from it, but it is up to us to lean into it anyway. and to say, no, I'm not letting this go until I know exactly what happened and why, because only then can we come at this from a perspective of intentional change. Only then can we actually fix it if there is something to be fixed. Most of the time, we don't elevate the wins enough either, enough to replicate them. So if we want more of the good stuff, how are we going to do that unless we question why? If we want less of the bad stuff, how are we going to do that without questioning why? We just tend to focus on, oh, just get through it. I just want to get through it. I just want to forget about it. But we can't do that. We must lean into the pain. Now, the things that I will kind of give for this section, whatever your whys when you've been through this, be really clear with yourself on what over the next 6 months you are going to ditch that didn't work. You are going to do more of because it did. And you're going to dabble in to test something. It might be that when you question why around something that didn't work, you're like, oh my God, that's why it didn't work. So you're not going to ditch it. You're just going to dabble in it a little bit differently this time. Whereas some things you're like, oh no, that system just fell apart because of this, 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 this. It was never going to work. It was doomed. I don't know why we didn't think of that. Doesn't matter why you didn't think of it. Ditch it and move on. And then once we've got through this, we're ready to build out a vision. Sorry about the memes, by the way. That's the way my brain works. Um, we need a vision of what success is. We've been through the hard conversations at this point. We've questioned why, we've questioned what went wrong and we've delved into it. We've faced up to the pain. But now we're ready to build out what success actually looks like by the end of 2025. Whether you are doing this on your own and it's something really simple, like I said, a weight loss goal or health or something like that, or whether you are doing this for the health of your business and for your bottom line. This is about far more than just targets and numbers on a spreadsheet. That's actually the easy bit. Like I said, business says they want to earn 5 million. Okay, well, you split it out, you blah, blah, blah. It's kind of the easy bit. What does success mean from a commercial standpoint? What does success mean from a process standpoint? And what does it mean where your people are concerned? And that includes you. If you are watching this and you're either a solopreneur or just a solo manager and you want to improve yourself, there are three critical questions that we want to ask at this point. Just double check that we've not missed anything in the chat. Oh, loving the ditch, do more dabbling. No worries. Glad you can take that one to the bank. Okay, so the three critical questions. And by the way, if you do have any more questions at this point, I'll just take a sip of water and give you a second to drop them in if that would be useful. But you can put them in the Q&A or you can put them in the chat. Either is absolutely fine. No? Okay. Let's move on. So, three critical questions for you. Number one, where do you want to be at the end of 2025? Nice and simple, but paint me a picture. Yeah. When you come to do that annual strategy in end of December or maybe it's start of January, don't overthink this. Just get it down. What does it look like? Yes, fine, targets are important, but what else? How would your team improve? How would you improve? What does good look like? We know this in business. If you don't have a target, you'll never hit it because what was the point? In marketing, if you don't have a KPI to set against a campaign, you'll never hit it. You can't do it without having an understanding of what success is. For a founder, that includes things like your role within the business. Are you stuck in the weeds right now and you want to be able to step away? Is that just a hiring issue or is it a mindset issue? I work with a lot of leaders who really struggle to delegate, and it's because they are, if we're being really honest, worried about how they'll justify their own value. If I stop doing all these things, oh my God, what's left for me? What do I do? It's really hard to pull yourself out of the weeds long enough and come up for air long enough to work out what you would even do if you didn't have all that crap on your plate every single day. Now is the perfect time to question that. Where have you been pulled into the weeds over the last 6 months? What has stopped you from hitting that goal, that target, that milestone that you really wanted? Are you getting dragged in because it is a genuine resourcing issue or a financial issue? Or is it a mindset issue? You're scared of doing it and therefore you self-sabotage. What do you want the end of 2025 to look like? And really, really broaden that out. If it's a sense of time freedom, cool. Creative freedom, cool, that's fine. For a director or a team lead, it could mean things that are like a really proactive team, with a strong set of values. Everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. Does it mean a shift in your leadership, if that's the case? Or do the processes need to change that are currently in place? And then there might be obviously a personal element to this instead. If one of the things that you pulled out in the retro, for example, was that you burn out and you've got to the summer and you're like, I know when I go away that I'm going to get ill for the first 3 days, something like that. What does success look like? Putting your health first? If so, what does that mean? What boundaries would you love to have in place? Build out and paint this picture for me of what success looks like. If you don't get clear on success, you will never hit it. So visions are really, really critical to success, whether it's just you or whether you're a team in a larger organization, because you need a strong motivating factor to keep you on track. Things will always get hard at some point. Of course they do. It's life. You can't stop that. Um, but as long as you have that anchor of what you are working towards all the time, you might not be able to have certainty in the wider market. Of course not. But you can have certainty in the output that you are showing up and doing every single day. The actions that you take every single day, are rooted to that core vision of success. And that's what you can have certainty in. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So this then becomes that one liner that helps you filter and assess incoming events, tactics, opportunities, projects. Is it going to contribute to that vision of success? That becomes your filter. Second question is then, well, what are the simplified goals that underpin it? So this is the thing. In the same way that with an annual strategy, we start with the big stuff that we wanted for 2025 and we break it down and all that. Now you might be sitting there thinking, well, if I'm being really honest, we never did the actions, we never did the outputs in the same way. That's fine. Who cares? You are where you are. We all start from where we start from. And if this is you, then this is perfect time to do it. And if you did it right from the beginning, amazing. This is the time to pivot. It doesn't matter. We all start from where we start from. So, what are the simplified goals that underpin that vision of success? So, if you had a whole list of stuff written down, or maybe it's just in your mind and you're thinking of processing this later, what are all the individual milestones that contribute towards it? Those are the things that you can spread out throughout the year. There's usually an order to them as well. Like I said, of sticking with the 5 million idea. Well, if you want to earn 5 million, you have to go past 1 million extra before you hit it. So, how do those goals look over the next 6 months instead? Yeah. This is how we start to back engineer it. So, what you build out in the beginning with that vision of success is the outcome. Now, what we're doing is starting to back engineer it with outputs. So we take that big vision of success. The second step is to create those goals, those simplified ones that underpin it across the next 6 months. But you could do this if it was annually over a year. And then we break it down into outputs, but I'll do that in a second. So when we do goals, think of it again in the same way. Commercial goals, process goals, and performance goals. These can form those big visible milestones throughout a year. But they also do something else that's really interesting. They broaden out your idea of what success is. Because so often teams get really demotivated if they don't hit a target. And then, my God, doesn't it drag on? You know that feeling? A feeling so low all the time because, well, now it's just getting further and further away. And often we shoot ourselves in the foot and we do our teams a disservice by doing this and just tracking a metric on a spreadsheet because that is naturally going to go up and down. But when it goes down, suddenly for some reason it stays there. It's because it's so hard to get yourself out of that. When everything about your value hinges on a number being hit, so easy to get off track. We must broaden out what success means so that when those dips on a spreadsheet come, and they will, of course they will, you'll also get the highs every time, but you will get lows. You're still able to look at other areas of a business and say, well, look, that's okay. It is what it is. We know that we're showing up and taking the right action to improve it. But where else are we super successful? What about where our processes are concerned? This is working really well. Look at all the amazing stuff that you've been able to do in the team. Of course, you're successful. You are not valuable and successful only when a number is hit. You must broaden out what that vision means. And we do that by making other areas of success visible within the business. And like I said, if it's personal performance for yourself, to use the weight loss thing again, you are not only a valuable, successful human being if the scale continuously goes down. Did you show up? Did you still do it even though you felt terrible? Have you been still eating well? Have you been making healthy choices? Broaden out your understanding of what success means, and you will feel successful and you will feel more wins a lot more. There's so many examples that I could give. For a founder, yeah, it might typically be a revenue goal, number of clients in a certain band, but then, well, what about the team? How will you see it? Does it feel tangible? How will you know when you've achieved it? All these things. Whereas for team leads, it might be more, departmental, it might be efficiency. Instead of just a number and the business outcome, what about efficiency? What about profitability? What about team morale? What about whether the team are taking more initiative or not? These are all great things that can broaden out success, but we must make it visible as much as we can. And then the third question, of course, is are you tracking the action or are you obsessing over the outcome? So we start with the big goal. That's your outcome. Then we break it down into smaller, more visible ones with a range of success associated. That gives you more chances to win, keeps you uplifted a lot more. And then we break down each of those. Let's say that you decided on quarterly milestones, right? You break down each of those into a monthly set of actions and even breaking it down to individual team members. Although, if you do have a team, task the team with coming up with it. You don't need to do that. Task the team with, right, these are our goals. I want every single person to tell me the actions they need to take every day, every week, every month. Insert time period here that works for you and your business that they are going to show up and do in order to achieve that. Now, look, you might need to work with them on it a little bit, but we're already starting to make them think and empower them into taking those outputs on themselves and to take control of their output in a way that is a little bit more creative, a little bit more proactive. So once it is visible, we're onto this common area that so many businesses struggle with, and we want to break it down and we want to back engineer your success. So we take that 12 months, again, I'm just repeating, we take the 12 months or the 6 months, whatever time period, because you can do this annually as well as for a half year. We create trackable goals, milestones across the year. We've done that. We take the goals, we split it out. We've done that. What action will generate the milestone? And that is what you obsess over. That's what you hold people to in their weekly meetings. You know, is everybody showing up and taking the action? If no, why not? It's okay. Sometimes they couldn't do it. But that's where things like blockers or mindset issues within the team, maybe they're worried about doing that. Maybe they've never done it before. Rather than just focusing on a big, vague outcome, by really hyper focusing on the individual actions that will lead to it, gives us way more room to make changes and improvements as they come up. And roadblocks is another section that we're gonna finish off with in a second. But really think about what action is going to generate those milestones that you've written down. If you want to implement a new tool within the business, break it down into steps that take you there, or get the team to do it for you. This is the point where you might not have all the information on this session, and that's totally okay. But this is the bit that you need to flesh out. Task the team with it, or sit down and work it out for yourself. Because this is then, like I say, the focus of the weekly meetings, the monthly meetings, and it becomes more tangible, more trackable. So when you leave here today, you'll have your top level analysis, hopefully, or when you rewatch this back and you want to go through it in more detail, you then have that vision, that idea of success. And you'll also have an idea of what actions will lead to those goals, which is so important. Now we're going to roll on to the final bit of this, which I've mentioned so far, but this is what starts to crop up when you actually hold people accountable and question, you know what to do, so why aren't you doing it? And by the way, that's okay, everybody's human. It's one of the main questions I ask most of the time with a lot of my clients. No matter how senior, I've worked with C-suite, I've worked with senior directors, all these sorts of super senior people. In fact, the more senior you get, the harder it is to do this because you've got no one to challenge you, to hold you accountable to showing up and taking the action and being really honest when if you were truly honest with yourself, kind of scares you a little bit. So having somebody to iron out what are the roadblocks is super important. Whether you do this for yourself or whether you take on this role within your teams, whether you question why people are not showing up and taking the action, this is super important. And there are three key blockers I'll just walk through. First, obviously, is yourself. Limiting and false beliefs, just getting trapped in your own head, you know, getting out of your own way. As a founder or a leader, this will probably be your biggest obstacle to success. Limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, false beliefs, not being enough, getting in your own way, all that kind of stuff. Saying one thing and doing another. You know, when was the last time you held up a mirror between your output and your outcome? You want this shiny thing, but what are you showing up and doing every day? Would it result in it? That puts you actually in a place of power. It can be vulnerable to admit it, but it puts you in a place of power because then you can do something about it. Then we have people. So after yourself, people are then the biggest issue. Our reaction to people-centric stresses, the performance of other people around us, having difficult conversations, dealing with frustrating clients, handling the pain of managing up, conflict resolution within the team. As businesses scale, it's never the product or the service that's the issue. It's always people that complicate things. So when we show up and question why an action isn't happening, be really honest. Is it yourself? Is it people? Or is it process? Current routines, habits, um, patterns of behavior, systems in place that are no longer useful to us. You know, this doesn't always mean um, a process, you know, like your onboarding system or your delivery mechanism or things like that. It can be processes and patterns within the mind. So, for example, it could mean a destructive routine that we've just not questioned the validity of in a while. It could mean a process within your team that's no longer a fit because people have changed, they think in a different way, they don't use that way of being. So things have fallen down a little bit more. There's loads of things around process, and it's not necessarily just as clear cut as like I said, like a delivery process or something like that. But these are the processes that we really need to look at because they've led us to this point in the first half of the year. And what we're saying at the half year point is, I don't want to be that person anymore. So we must question the systems and the habits that underpin us. Why? Because we're questioning the actions and the outputs that we take every day. And often we are a product of our habits, right? And habits are a set of actions strung together that we do just on autopilot. So if we want to break that, if we want to take a different action, we must look at the systems that underpin us. So, what could stand in your way of success? What can you expect or predict at this stage around each of these three areas? Really question the actions that you've listed when you come to do it now, whether you've been doing it as we've been talking, you know, those big goals and milestones and the actions that you've said. What could stand in your way of achieving them? What are the ones that you know are going to be a problem? Get ahead of them now. Go through your goals and be honest. What is stopping you? And why haven't you already done all of it? I have no doubt that everybody on this call is fucking good at what they do because I know BIMA for a while and we have really good members. And even if you're not a BIMA member and you're just at this because you thought it was useful, the very fact that you have showed up to something that is a half year performance review tells me that you're good at what you do because you wouldn't be here otherwise. So there's a reason why you haven't already hit those, and now is the time to question why. So, a few key mindset takeaways. Who do you need to be to execute what we've laid out? Whether this is something that you question now or later on, and also if this is something that you want to lift and you want to use in your teams before everybody goes off on summer holidays, um, that's also something that you could question them with. You know, who do we as a unit need to be to execute what we've laid out? What needs to change? What kinds of blockers stand in our way of success when you consider some of those performance goals that you've got? And what can you do now to get ahead of them? Whenever we feel out of control, the best thing to do is always to question, what have I got control over? Because there's so many things that we can't control. We can't control other people, but we can control our reaction to them. We can control how we prep for it. Get ahead of those things now while you have the chance, because those things are probably going to come up if you can think of them now. So don't let that primitive stress response in you take over and just default to saying yes when you should have said no or whatever it happens to be, because that's where burnout comes from. It's that prolonged stress presence. Get ahead of it now. Come up with an answer now that you can default to, and let that be the thing that dictates you. And you'll know it's always rooted with that vision of success in mind. And then, of course, the biggest shift, which I said right at the beginning of this thing, have you been obsessing over outcomes or outputs? It is totally okay if you've been focusing on the big vision that is a little bit vaguer and people have hidden. Honestly, thousands of businesses do. I don't think I've ever come across a business that's done this perfectly ever. You're a human being, so it's okay. Most people start in this frame of mind, but is this a good opportunity for you to maybe shift that? Play around with this idea and come at this from a place of curiosity and opportunity and creativity, not of negativity of, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong. No, you don't know what you don't know. And now that we've got this new little shift that we can apply, that we can use as a reframe, where could this help you? Could it help you? Is this something that maybe you've been nailing in some areas of the business, but maybe some areas haven't been? And actually, that's the one area that you never really realized was so different in the way that you were applying skills to it or applying your mentality to it. All the things that when we think about the areas of life, finance, business, career, health, love, relationships, all of these things, the way that we navigate life is through a set of behaviors and values, everything else. Everything is a transferable skill. And if you notice in the business or in your life that you're nailing one area, but one area just isn't working out, what can you transfer? Often it's something as simple as a mindset shift like this. So if you remember nothing else, let this be that question that sticks in your mind, not only to challenge yourself in those moments where you're trapped in the day to day, but also to challenge your heads of department, your directors, your team members. Are they thinking about that vague outcome all the time that is the big goal that is intimidating and makes them nervous and that then impacts all of the performance? Or are they just focusing on showing up and taking the right action every day? If they do, the result takes care of itself. When we want emotional buy-in and motivation, we talk about outcomes. But when we want to track and hold people accountable, we obsess over outputs. And I really hope that shift helps somebody today. And I think if this wants to roll over, perfect. Now, your very next action is to probably watch over this again because I know this is a lot of information, but refine those goals, question those areas that we've covered, think about the roadblocks, what actions are going to get you towards your vision of success. But remember, if you're struggling with some of those blockers to work out a way forward, focus on the ideal scenario, which sounds great, but it's really hard to do. Think about what you can control and influence. Now, I promised you guys a freebie, so I'm going to give it you now, because some people will take this away and be like, I know exactly what to do. And some people will have come to this and be like, oh my God, this is a lot. And if that is you, I said that to the BIMA guys before that whoever joins this call, I'm going to offer a free session with me to go through and unpick any of these areas where you feel like, oh my God, I need somebody to talk to. I need somebody to bounce ideas off. I need that challenger in the room because you guys are scaling and you're finding change adoption really difficult. You're finding that everyone's got a cortisol response all the time, whatever it happens to be. Might be personal performance, might be business performance. But I wanted everybody to leave today with a good idea of what support could look like for them. So please, by all means, use that Calendly link. I'm also gonna drop it in the chat as well. Um, because then everybody's got access to it if for whatever reason you can't use it. Um, but this is a good opportunity for you, whether you book that session with me or not, for you to take stock of what this year has brought you and then focus on what the rest of the year could hold in terms of opportunity. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to drop this in the chat for everybody. Um, to everyone, there we go. Just in case you couldn't use the QR code. But we've still got a couple of minutes left. So if anybody has any questions or concerns or anything like that at this point, throw them in the chat or in the Q&A. I'm happy to answer them. Oh, thank you, Katie. I'm glad that you've enjoyed it so much, and I'm glad that you feel energized walking away. That's amazing. Like I said, if anybody needs help, just book that session with me. I do probably give away far too much free time, but I don't care. I like helping people, so I can't help it. Good reminder of simple actions that make a difference. Thank you. No problem at all. I'm glad I could be that reminder for you today. Q&A. Let's have a look. Do people regress over summer holes, then panic once back? Great question. Um, so I don't know if you've noticed, but there is absolutely always a September slump, isn't there? When everybody gets back and then everyone goes, oh shit, because they delay so many things until September. Like, oh, that's future me's problem. Do people regress over the summer? Absolutely. Why? Because they kind of switch off a little bit. They think that the summer is kind of fair game and then panic once they're back. Absolutely. That's why we get a September slump. Now, personally, after speaking to a lot of different people on this, I think it's because we're trained that way. I think it's because we are trained from a very young age to see summer as, I don't care. I'm off for the summer holidays now. School is out. And then we get back in September and then we go, oh God. But the problem when you're in business and you're an adult is that all you end up doing is delaying that to-do list and those projects and those campaigns until the last minute. And then the problem is that suddenly, rather than doing this half year review now, tackling it, coming up with something, taking a run up to September, instead, people end up with this idea of squeezing a year's worth of things that they should have done, that they wish they would have done, that they want to do, into just 4 months. September, October, November, December. But actually, they then think, oh, well, December's basically out because it's Christmas. So actually, it's 3 months. So people do tend to panic, but it's almost like a self-imposed learned panic. It is never too late to close a revenue gap. Believe me, I've done it a lot. It is never too late to address the things that are stressing you out. Um, People do tend to burn out over the summer because they do 6 months of hard slog where they don't stop and then they drop and then they wonder what happened. Don't let that happen to you. Take this time, even if you want to take another, section of today or whatever you need right now to take stock to alleviate that idea of regressing. Please do. And know that when you get to September, is panicking all over the place because it feels like back to school. We've only got 3 months. Christmas is around the corner. Oh my God, what we're going to do? You will be the one that already preempted this months ago. So take that time, please do. But yes, you're absolutely right. That happens every time. I think we've got. Would you be happy to take the session on individual goals and strategy basis, or is this more specific? Oh no, absolutely, yeah. That session is for personal performance and individual goals just as much as it is business. It is everything to do with performance. So please book that if it is something that you want to work on personally. Um, Oh, thank you, Shandeep. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Right, we had 1 minute past 11, so we made it all the way through to the end. Thank you so much for sticking with me, everybody. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Please book that session if you think it would be valuable to you, and have a fantastic rest of the week. And please take that time for yourselves, okay? Take care and bye for now.